I never expected that a simple trip to the bank would turn into the most stressful and eye-opening day of my life. It all started when my dad, who I had always trusted, suggested we go together to finalize some paperwork. At first, I thought it was just a routine matter, something related to family finances, maybe transferring funds or updating accounts. But as soon as we entered the bank, I began to notice the tension in his voice and the subtle way he kept glancing around, as if he wanted no one to overhear our conversation. We approached the counter, and my dad handed over a folder filled with papers, telling me to sign where necessary. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Something about the way he was pushing me to sign everything immediately didn't feel right. I asked a few questions about the documents, but his responses were vague and impatient. He insisted that I just follow his lead and trust him, that it was all standard procedure. That's when I remembered a small piece of advice my close friend had once given me: always read what you're signing, even if it's your own parent handing it to you. I hesitated, pretending to adjust my documents while secretly scanning the pages. My eyes widened in shock. The papers weren't just routine forms, they were legal documents that would give him control over everything I owned, from my personal savings to property I had inherited. For a moment, I froze, unsure of what to do. My dad noticed my hesitation and tried to reassure me with a charming, almost persuasive smile, but it only made me more determined to protect myself. Earlier that week, I had been cautious and had hidden a small note in my wallet, a backup plan in case something like this ever happened. It was simple but powerful, a message detailing my ownership rights and instructions for the bank manager to verify my consent directly with me before processing any transaction. The note was a lifeline, something tangible I could rely on when words alone might not be enough. As I subtly reached for it, my hands shook with anxiety. At that moment, the bank manager walked by, noticing the tension at our counter. I quickly handed the note to him, explaining quietly that I wanted to ensure all transactions were authorized directly by me. The manager's eyes scanned the paper, and I could see the realization dawning on him. He looked back at my dad, whose confident demeanor suddenly faltered. My dad attempted to downplay the situation, but the manager was firm and professional, insisting that he could not allow any of the documents to be signed without verifying my explicit consent. Time seemed to stretch as the confrontation unfolded. My dad, who had always been assertive and persuasive in family matters, suddenly seemed small and uncertain. He tried to argue, but the manager remained calm, repeating that any transaction against my wishes would be illegal. I felt a wave of relief and empowerment. The hidden note, which I had prepared as a precaution, had given me a chance to stand my ground and prevent what could have been a devastating loss. After the initial shock, my dad grew quiet, muttering under his breath as we moved to a private office to discuss the matter further. The bank manager stayed with us, ensuring that I understood every document fully before agreeing to anything. I realized in that moment how important it was to have someone impartial on my side, someone who valued legal responsibility over familial pressure. The situation was tense, but it also taught me a critical lesson about asserting my own rights. By the end of the day, no papers had been signed in my dad's favor. I left the bank feeling a mix of relief, pride, and lingering sadness. It was painful to realize that someone so close to me had tried to manipulate the situation for their gain. Yet, I also felt empowered knowing that I had acted wisely, using foresight and preparation to protect myself. The hidden note had been more than just paper, it was a symbol of my independence and my refusal to be coerced, even by family. As I walked home, I reflected on what had happened and how easily things could have gone wrong if I had trusted blindly. I realized that protecting oneself often requires vigilance, courage, and sometimes a small act of clever planning. That day, the bank became more than a place for transactions, it became a place where I claimed my autonomy, where I demonstrated that no one, not even a parent, could take what rightfully belonged to me without my consent. The hidden note had saved my fortune, but more importantly, it had affirmed my ability to stand up for myself when it mattered most. I never thought a routine visit to the bank could turn into a test of wits and courage, but that day proved me wrong. It started when my dad suggested we go together to finalize some family documents. At first, I assumed it was a simple matter, probably updating accounts or signing a minor paper. But something about the way he carried the folder, the way he glanced around nervously, set off alarm bells in my mind. I had learned over the years that when he insisted on haste and secrecy, it usually meant he had his own agenda. We approached the counter, and my dad handed over the folder, urging me to sign immediately. "Just trust me," he said with a smile, "it's all routine." I forced a smile back but felt uneasy. Something didn't add up. I began flipping through the documents surreptitiously, pretending to organize my papers. The words on the pages made my heart race. These weren't simple forms. They were legal documents designed to transfer my assets, my property, and control of my accounts into his name. I froze for a moment, disbelief washing over me. I had always trusted him, but this crossed a line. I remembered a precaution I had taken earlier, almost on a whim. I had written a small note, something personal and discreet, and hidden it in my wallet. It outlined my rights and instructed that any transaction affecting my assets required verification directly from me. At that moment, it felt like a lifeline. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the note, praying that I hadn't misjudged the seriousness of the situation. Just as I discreetly handed the note to the bank manager, who was walking by, the entire dynamic shifted. The manager's eyes scanned the note quickly, and I saw a flash of understanding cross his face. My dad tried to maintain his confident demeanor, insisting that everything was normal, but the manager wasn't fooled. He calmly explained that no documents could be signed without my clear, informed consent. He looked at me, reassuringly, asking if I wanted to review every line, which I did. The tension in the room was palpable. My dad, who was usually so commanding in family matters, suddenly seemed unsure and irritated. He attempted to argue, to persuade the manager that I should simply go along with his plan, but the manager stood firm. He made it clear that the law required my authorization, and nothing could bypass it. I felt a sense of relief I had never experienced before, a mix of empowerment and vindication. The hidden note had worked exactly as I had hoped, giving me the leverage to protect myself without confrontation escalating further. We moved to a private office, with the manager accompanying us to ensure everything was handled properly. I carefully went through each document, reading every clause and asking questions where I had doubts. My dad grew increasingly frustrated, but I stayed composed, knowing that I had the upper hand. Because I had prepared in advance. For years, I had allowed him to make decisions for the family, trusting his judgment. But this day was different. This day was about me asserting my independence and safeguarding what was rightfully mine. By the time the paperwork was put aside, no signatures had been added in my dad's favor. I walked out of the bank feeling a mixture of pride and relief. I realized that the hidden note had been more than just a precaution. It had been a tool of empowerment, a subtle but effective way to take control of a situation that could have gone disastrously wrong. I also understood something important about trust. It's vital to trust, but it's equally vital to verify, especially when the stakes are high. That day taught me a lesson I will never forget. Courage and foresight are sometimes more powerful than confrontation or anger. By acting calmly, thinking ahead, and preparing for the worst, I had turned what could have been a devastating betrayal into a moment of triumph. The bank manager's intervention was crucial, but it was my preparation that made all the difference. Without the hidden note, I might have signed away everything I had worked for, relying solely on trust that had been misplaced. As I left the bank, I reflected on how a simple piece of paper had shifted the balance of power. It reminded me that protection doesn't always come from confrontation or aggression. Sometimes it comes from careful planning, foresight, and knowing exactly when to act. I felt a renewed sense of confidence in my ability to handle difficult situations and a deep appreciation for the small but powerful steps that can safeguard one's life and assets. Looking back, I realized that the day wasn't just about money or property, it was about claiming my agency and asserting my right to make decisions about my own life. It was about learning that even in the face of manipulation by someone I trusted, I could stand firm, prepared, and calm. The hidden note, seemingly insignificant, had been my secret weapon, proving that sometimes the most subtle actions can have the most profound impact. That day, at that bank, I learned that true empowerment comes not from force, but from preparation, clarity, and the courage to act when it matters most. I never thought a simple bank visit could turn into a battle of wits and courage, but that day proved me completely wrong. It started innocently enough, with my dad suggesting we go together to handle some routine paperwork. I assumed it was nothing serious, maybe updating accounts or signing a minor document. But the moment we stepped inside the bank, I noticed the subtle tension in his body language, the way he kept glancing over his shoulder, and the slight urgency in his tone. Something felt off. I had learned over the years to trust my instincts, and that day they were screaming at me to be cautious. We reached the counter, and my dad handed over a folder of papers, urging me to sign them immediately. "Don't worry," he said with a reassuring smile, "everything is standard procedure." I forced a polite smile, but inside, I felt a creeping unease. There was something about his insistence on speed and secrecy that didn't sit right. I began flipping through the documents under the guise of organizing them, and what I read made my blood run cold. These weren't just ordinary forms, they were legal documents designed to transfer control of my personal assets, property, and accounts directly into his name. For a moment, I was paralyzed by disbelief and betrayal. Earlier that week, I had taken a precaution, a small act of foresight that now felt crucial. I had written a discreet note outlining my ownership rights and hidden it in my wallet, instructing that the bank verify my consent directly before allowing any transactions. At that moment, the note became my lifeline. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for it, trying to remain calm while not alerting my dad to what I was doing. Just then, the bank manager happened to walk by, and I discreetly handed him the note, explaining in a low voice that I wanted to ensure everything was properly verified. His expression changed immediately, his professional intuition picking up on the tension. My dad, who had been radiating confidence, suddenly looked uneasy. He attempted to brush it off, insisting that everything was routine, but the manager remained firm. He explained that no documents could be signed without my explicit authorization and that it was his duty to ensure my rights were fully protected. The confrontation, though quiet, was intense. My dad, normally so persuasive and assertive in family matters, seemed suddenly small and frustrated. He tried to argue, but the manager's calm professionalism left no room for manipulation. I felt a sense of relief I had never known before, mingled with pride and vindication. The hidden note had worked exactly as I had hoped, giving me a clear and defensible way to prevent what could have been an enormous loss. We moved to a private office, where the manager guided me through every document line by line. I read each clause carefully, asked questions about anything unclear, and refused to sign until I fully understood the implications. My dad grew increasingly impatient, muttering under his breath, but I remained composed. For the first time, I felt the power of being prepared, of having forethought and evidence to back me up. The situation could have easily gone disastrously wrong, but my careful planning had turned the tables entirely. By the end of the visit, none of the documents had been signed in my dad's favor. I walked out of the bank with a sense of relief and empowerment. The hidden note, which seemed like a small precaution at the time, had become my greatest safeguard. It reminded me that trust is important, but verification is critical, especially when significant stakes are involved. That day, I had learned a lesson in vigilance, foresight, and the importance of standing firm in the face of pressure, even from someone as close as a parent. Leaving the bank, I reflected on the events and realized that the day was about far more than finances. It was about reclaiming my autonomy and asserting my right to make decisions for myself. I felt proud of my ability to act strategically, to use subtle preparation to protect myself, and to prevent manipulation without escalating the situation unnecessarily. The hidden note had been more than a piece of paper, it had been a tool of empowerment, a quiet but powerful way to ensure my voice and consent mattered above all else. That day, I understood that real empowerment doesn't always come from confrontation or aggression. Sometimes it comes from preparation, foresight, and knowing exactly how to act at the right moment. The experience strengthened my confidence, not just in my ability to protect my assets, but in my ability to trust my instincts and assert myself when it matters most. The hidden note had saved me from losing everything, but it had also given me a priceless sense of self-assurance. As I walked away from the bank, I knew that I would never again underestimate the importance of preparation, of having a clear plan to protect myself from unexpected threats, even when they came from people I trusted. That day, a simple act, a carefully written note, had shifted the balance of power, turning a potentially devastating situation into a moment of triumph. I left with a renewed sense of independence, a clear understanding that vigilance, courage, and subtle foresight are sometimes the most powerful tools one can possess, and that no one, not even a parent, could take what was rightfully mine without my knowledge and consent.